Go. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Marilyn London, membership chairman and board member of the Friends of the Stirling Road Library. And looking around, I see that many of our friends are here. So I thank you so very, very much for being a friend and supporting us and allowing us to be able to have the programs as wonderful as we have, such as Shelly tonight. So if you are here for the first time, or if you're a guest of ours, welcome. We hope that you like the program, and please check us out at www.stirlingfriends.org and decide to become a friend as well, and have access to all of the programs that we have, including Shelly's wonderful selections that will be in November and December, and he is now negotiating with us to give us new films. So we're well into 2022 with Shelly, and you are in for the best treat, and $10 a year is the biggest bargain in town. Thank you, Jackie. I see you're here tonight. I always quote you, and so thank you so much. You've all read Shelly's bio, and you know how wonderful he is and how fortunate we are to be able to have him on our roster. And tonight's film, Nowhere in Africa, is fabulous. I loved it, and I'm sure that everybody else will too. And he's going to tell us about all the things that we sort of missed when we thought we saw it all, but that's why he's so great. And he will also give us some information about his next film, which is on the 10th of November, The Dinner, so that we all see the right movie. So Shelly, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to be back. It's nice to see you. Anyway, this month's film, this is Nowhere in Africa. It was produced in 2001, and it was directed by a woman, Caroline Link. And Caroline Link is a very interesting director, as well as Nowhere in Africa, which won the Academy Award in 2003 for Best Foreign Language Film. She had done some years before, back in 1996, she did another film which was nominated, which made the finals for the Academy Award, entitled Beyond Silence. Wonderful film, which I don't know how many of you have seen this movie Coda on Apple television, but it's a similar kind of story about a young woman who was born to two deaf parents. And instead of a singer, she pursues a career as a clarinetist. And it's a wonderful, wonderful film, also from Germany, naturally. And she just this year also has a film which came out in the last year, which received some very good notices, and also adapted from a novel entitled When Hitler Stole the Pink Rabbit. When Hitler Stole the Pink Rabbit. It was a best-selling novel several years ago, and in fact, it was taught in schools for a while. And that's, I don't know if it's available yet. I will check on that. But anyway, Nowhere in Africa received, as I said, the Oscar, as well as the German Film Award, which is their equivalent of the Academy Award for Best Film, among 17 other international awards. And it was adapted from the 1995 novel by Stephanie Zweig. And I will tell you more about Stephanie Zweig after I get through with the film, because that in and of itself is another whole interesting story. Anyway, the story goes from 1938 to the end of World War II. It takes place at the beginning, at least, both in Germany and in Kenya. And we follow the adventures of the Redlick family, Walter, Jettel, and Regina, and other characters who will enter. The family spent most of its stay in Aljuro Orak, which is situated directly at the equator, 3,000 meters above sea level. It was a very remote place, even for Africa, where they had this ranch farm. Anyway, and it provides a fascinating glimpse into what was a little known chapter in World War II history. The film tells of a handful of Jews, as you've seen, on the eve of the war, who fled to the wilds of Kenya to escape the rising tide of anti-Semitism in Germany. And it's narrated by the daughter Regina. The foundation of the story rests on a series of interlocking ironies. These are all ironies. These Jewish refugees who find themselves being treated in a more humane fashion in this ostensibly uncivilized society than they were in the so-called civilized one they've been forced to flee. And that's the first and foremost irony of the film. Second, the men in this dislocated community end up fighting against their own native country. The German men who decide to join the Allies in the fight are now fighting against their own native country, and they eagerly join to overthrow Hitler. Walter, the first to go to Africa from the family and settle a place for his family, as we see at the beginning of the film, finds himself not only in a hostile environment, but with a world that is totally unfamiliar to him. He comes to rely, as we meet at the beginning of the film, and he's a mysterious character when we first see him, Owar, who becomes his guide into this world, and eventually his friend, saving him from the ravages of malaria, as we saw at the beginning of the film before his family shows up. Owar is a pivotal character in the film. He ultimately becomes part of their family, educating both Jettel and Regina on tribal ways, and he is their interlocutor with this whole culture. And we see how he teaches Regina not just the language, but the ways of the tribe. After the prologue in Germany, and we see the rise of Nazism, we see how the family living in a society, is another irony, which they believe to be well entrenched, as well as privileged. They were upper middle class. They become victims of anti-Semitism. To Jettel, it's almost unbelievable. She reluctantly makes the decision to leave, as you remember. She doesn't want to go. She doesn't believe anything could happen. And she treats her departure somewhat frivolously. She doesn't deal with the reality of where she's going. When she and Regina finally arrive, although they become victims of prejudice and bigotry on one side, Jettel still feels superior to and looks down upon this culture they come into, and a people she believes are clearly inferior to her own. She also will develop a relationship with another gentleman, Walter Susskind, who has been there for some years. And this, again, is something that was very real. A number of German Jews had left Germany years before and settled in Africa. Most went to South Africa, but as we see, Walter settled in Kenya, and he committed himself to a life in Africa. He just didn't see anything left for him in Germany, and she will prove. But it's interesting because Regina is the character that undergoes the greatest transformation in the film. She really is the most transformed by the end of the film. And Regina, the narrator of the story, grows up before our eyes. And filmically, it's very interesting. You know, at first she becomes assimilated among the tribal children, telling them the stories, making up stories for them. And she experiences her first relationship, and then she goes off to school. And we see in a montage how she grows cinematically, going back and forth to the school. But while she's at the school, she again experiences anti-Semitism of her own, and she overcomes it. You know, she proves to the headmaster of the school how bright she is, and he takes a liking to her, and he gives her books to read when she goes away. And when she returns back as a teenager, we see her reach a coming of age ritual with the tribe. which is very interesting, which I'll speak of after when I talk about the cinematography of the film. But they were forced, again, they're forced to leave the farm when the war really hits in Africa. And Regina, witnesses her mother enter into an affair with an officer, so she can secure hers and Regina's safety. Jettel will also come to realize how the war in Europe has destroyed not just her family, but so many Jewish lives in the Holocaust. She's still a bit self-centered. She doesn't realize the depth of the war. Finally, as the war comes closer, when Walter feels that Jettel, finds out that Jettel has had this affair, he joins up to fight, and the war comes close. They trade places and attitudes over this period. He, who was so eager to remain in Kenya by the end, he feels the need to return to a post-Hitler Germany to help rebuild his native country as a judge. And she, once so eager to leave it, wants to remain in Kenya, a land she's learned to love, a country she has come in many ways to think of as her own, which is so beautifully expressed in that closing scene when she reaches out from the train and takes the banana from the African woman. It is such a touching moment and a very a beautiful symbolic moment of the two hands joining. In fact, it is the transition that Jettel undergoes throughout the course of the story that makes Nowhere in Africa such a fascinating film. For Jettel is clearly, as I said, the most interesting and complex character in the movie. She's haughty and coldly superior at the outset. She eventually comes to see the beauty of difference that exists between the people and culture of this place, an appreciation that paradoxically brings home for her the universal nature of human beings. And despite the grim reality of what is happening to her family and friends back in Germany, both the land and the people of Kenya soon transform her into a woman who is able to see and understand the truly important things in life: tolerance, acceptance, love, and family, all in that basic order. She really begins to see, and her world opens up as a result of it. All the actors in the film are superb. Julianne Kohler, who plays Jettel, is one of the most highly acclaimed actresses in Germany, and she's a standout in the film. She was also, Caroline Link has used her in more than one film, and she stars in that previous film I talked about, Beyond Silence, and she turns in an equally compelling performance in that film. Sideti Anyulo provides an outstanding presence as Owar. He was born in Kajulu, Kenya, and he studied law. He was essentially a lawyer, but he quit his profession. He quit the law to accomplish his desire of being an actor. He was actively involved in the grassroots organization of the Kenyan film industry. And this is where it gets interesting. It's said that the Kenyan film experts had recommended him when they heard about this, that this film was being planned. They recommended him at an early stage for the role of Owar, but they couldn't find him. They couldn't locate him. He had moved away from Nairobi to a small village in the western part of Kenya. And the local casting agent for Nowhere in Africa tracked him down to the village near Lake Victoria and offered him the role. And he immediately accepted, and it brought him to international fame, as well as the prize. He won the prize for Best Supporting Actor at the Dublin International Film Festival, as well as other awards around the world. He went on to featured roles in a remake of King Solomon's Mines in 2004, and he was in The Constant Gardener in 2005. Sadly, in 2008, he fell sick while at home in Kajulu, and he was sent to a hospital, and he passed away a few days later at the age of 53. So sadly, his career and his life were cut short. Concerning the cinematography in the film, the widescreen photography, even if you're watching it on a TV, it captures, with crystal clear clarity, the haunting beauty of the African countryside. It brings this film to an almost epic quality, so much like another film of its kind out of Africa, with Meryl Streep and Robert Redford, but it's equally powerful in terms of its landscape photography and its story. It's so epic in scope and so intimate in its family drama. Indeed, despite the personal nature of the story, there's this lurking ever-presence in the background, mainly through the letters that Jettel receives. If you remember, from the desperate and increasingly endangered relatives back home. She gets those letters and she's not sure what's really happening. And it's the larger picture of a world gone suddenly, inexplicably mad. A world that feels strangely remote to her, yet which is all too real in its menace and influence. This isolated community that she lives in may provide for these dislocated people a refuge for the body, but it can't provide a refuge for the mind and soul, as we saw in the film. They are still haunted by what is going on back in Germany throughout the film. But we see moments, even though they're secular Jews for the most part, we see moments at the beginning of the film. We see them celebrate the Sabbath. They invite Susskind over. They say the prayers. They still have an attachment to Judaism. They still have their feelings. That hasn't left them. And with the scenes countered, and this is the beauty, this again is the wonderful irony in the film, the tribal celebrations in the film that Jettel and Regina attend. That great one where they're drinking from the heart, they pull out the heart of the animal and all of this. And, Jettel at first is mortified, and then she, those were filmed during actual celebrations. They said, in fact, the director, Caroline Link talks about it. She says they went on for hours and they almost shot the entire celebration. They had to edit it down to these few scenes, but they said it was remarkable to watch this, and how even the actors were welcomed into the tribe, as well as the characters themselves. But the two celebrations that we see, all of these are not actors. These are all members of the tribe. And it was wonderful to see it within the film. Excuse me. It gives it such an ethnographic quality. And the attack of the locusts later on in the film is wonderfully done. I mean, it's a great symbolic moment in the film. It's a time when Walter and Jettel are not really getting along, but at that moment when they attack, how Walter comes running back and defends his family. And in Jettel's eyes, she sees how dedicated he is to the family and the protection of the family. Finally, it brings them to the point of where they do make love. And then finally, she admits to him she's pregnant by him with another child who will become their son, Max, named after the grandfather that we met at the beginning. Now, Stephanie Zweig, the novelist who wrote the book, she was born in Germany in Upper Silesia in 1932. So she was only 8 years old when they left. And upon moving actually she was younger, she was 6 years old. Upon moving to Africa, in truth, the family spent most of its stay in that place in the film that was up, over 4,500 feet above sea level. It was so remote, and they spent most of their time there. They did get moved to that hotel situation. And that was interesting in the film when they come in there and they're treating all of these people better than they're treating the guests. And I love it when they bring out the lobsters, and those who are religious are looking and saying, why are they serving us this? But they were treated, she says they were treated well, but they were still, interestingly enough, submitted to a bit of anti-Semitism on the part of the British. And she goes and visits that couple who's heavily involved in the Zionist movement, and is trying to get help from them. And he accosts her and he says, don't you realize what's going on? That she doesn't, and then the wife does explain to her, that he's got family that's dying in Germany in concentration camps. And it begins to, we see the depth of what is going on among all these Jews, and finally, in reality, the father did enlist in the British Army. He did go off to fight. And his family was invited to return to Germany in 1947. They didn't go back until 1947. It did take 2 years after the war, but her father was appointed a judge on his return to be instrumental in the denazification of Germany. No Nazis were allowed, no ex-Nazis were allowed to serve in the courts. They wanted to wipe the courts. Although I will tell you, there's a terrific film that's available to you on Amazon, and it's entitled The Collini Case. The Collini Case. It's Collini, Collini Case. It's a German film, and it deals with some of what happened after the war in terms of the Nazis still remaining in parts of the government. And it takes place in present day, but goes back, deals with that period. So it's a film I highly recommend. It's a very suspenseful film. It's really well done, and has a great cast. Anyway, they were shocked when they returned to Germany in 1947 by the destruction, the hunger, and the despair that they witnessed. This was no longer the place they remembered, especially Jettel and Walter. Stephanie, who couldn't read or write German when she went back to Germany, it took her several months. She was enrolled in a private school, and she learned German very quickly, but she did have problems readjusting. This became an alien world to her. She was African. The way she saw herself, she was African. She was African and British is the way she saw herself. And however, she, after graduating from high school, she immediately went to work for a journalist for a Jewish newspaper in Germany. And then she went off to college. In 1963, she became the chief editor of culture for a section of a paper called the Abendpost nach der Jusgabe in Frankfurt. It was an important newspaper. She had been working as a freelance journalist and an author since 1988. She wound up writing something like 9 novels. She won many awards and prizes in Germany for her novels, and 2 of them were directly autobiographical. This was the first, Nowhere in Africa, which was followed up by a novel called Somewhere in Germany, which dealt with her life after the war. Both of them have been translated into a number of languages and have done very well. They've both been major bestsellers around the world. In 1993, Stephanie Zweig received the Decoration of Merit by the Federal Republic of Germany for her books that sold more than 7 million copies and were translated into 15 languages. She passed away in April of 2014. and is buried in a Jewish cemetery in Frankfurt. But she is honored. There are places named after her in Germany. And she really was, she was an activist, a novelist, and accomplished quite a bit in her lifetime. And if all she did was write this book for us to have this film, would have certainly been enough. So I hope that sort of fills in a lot, and I'd love to hear any questions or comments you have, or deal with any questions you have about the film. So if you want to raise your hand, go into the chat. I'll be glad to answer. Oh, somebody put in also The Nasty Girl. Yes, The Nasty Girl is a great film about Germany after the war, about a young teenage girl that begins to question Germany's responsibility for what they did in the war, in a village that doesn't want to admit that there were a number of them who were Nazis. And it is great, but I don't even know if it's available. Yeah, I think it may be available now. You'll have to rent it, but it is another film worthwhile seeing. Anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to ask? Somebody's got to have something. I hope. Just, you have these little yellow hands. Where are they? No, not there. Okay. Here we're getting some. Jackie, I feel like Jettel, the mother, was the most changed. Yes, she was. Yes, she was the most changed. Yes, the cinematography was wonderful in the film. It took them several months to make the film, as you can imagine. Shooting on this ranch in Germany was very remote. Bringing in the equipment, shooting films like this is not easy. Electricity can go out at any time. So and storms and things get cut off. So you can imagine it's as arduous shooting the film as it is living there. Gee, I'm surprised nobody has anything to say. You all hated the film, I guess.
We loved it.
I know.
Shelly,
Yes.
this is Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
I found the film overwhelmingly accurate and honest. And at the fact that they depicted the German Jews as thinking, how could the Germans possibly turn on them? They had lived there for so long. They were part of this society. And I thought that was so well explained in the film.
Yes. Yeah, well,
Great
especially
film.
what was interesting was, the film opens, they're spending time out playing in the snow. And the young
Yes.
boy that helps her up, she looks and he's wearing the armband, the Nazi armband, and we see how the Nazi youth was already being indoctrinated, and we saw how they were being spurned by their
Exactly.
neighbors. But what was so interesting was that Jettel really couldn't believe what was happening, and she was so she talks about the dress that she gets her sister, and she wants to take along all the china and the silverware. And if you remember, Walter says, "This is what you brought to Africa." It's like, weren't you thinking of where you're going? It was, in a sense, you're right. It was that sense of non-belief that happened. It was very interesting. Clara had a question. Stephanie's Zweig related to the writer Stefan Zweig? Not at all. Isn't it interesting? No, Zweig was a common name in Germany, common Jewish name. Stefan Zweig was also Jewish, yes, but no, they weren't related to each other. In fact, there is a wonderful film about Stefan Zweig, a fictional narrative about Stefan Zweig, the writer, which you can see. The Maasai culture, yes. It's one of the oldest tribal cultures in Africa, the Masai Mara. And they all these rituals that you saw, they did celebrate. Now, it's interesting you ask, because Owar is, if you remember, originally he doesn't want to do some of the things that they ask him to do. They're women's chores, but he winds up doing them, and even the women are starting to look at him funny. But he has all these wives. He also had all these wives back home, and at the end, he makes that pilgrimage. That's because when he's leaving at the end and says goodbye to Regina, it's basically he feels his time is coming, and he wants to return to his village, and he will make his pilgrimage back, knowing that his time will soon be up, which is a heartbreaking moment at the end of the film, which is wonderfully shot when she runs to him. And then there is that scene, it's funny, and I know some of you probably looked, there's that scene when she's as a teenager with the young boy, and he says, so you're growing up now, and says, I bet you won't even take off your shirt. And she takes off her shirt. They think nothing of it. It's a whole different culture in dealing with women. Being topless is not something that they're afraid of. And it showed her, acceptance of the culture. And it wasn't like he was going to make an advance on her all of a sudden. It was just, you're one of us. Don't you want to be one of us? Is essentially what he's asking. Barbara, you had your hand is up, I see.
You have to unmute.
You are unmuted.
No.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Two things. One, just the way in which little details mattered, like the dress. She bought the
Yes.
dress instead of doing something sensible. And then ultimately her daughter wears it. And they go to the ceremony, the African ceremony with that beautiful dress on.
Yes.
And I just loved that as just a sort of good example of just taking a little thing, weaving it in, and making it mean so much.
Yes.
Yeah, and I also wondered, did she get back to Africa at all? Did she return to Kenya?
Not that I know of. It's in any research I did. She really had nothing to do with the film. Interestingly enough, Caroline Link wrote the screenplay, and went and with her permission, actually went and made the film. But she really didn't have much to do with the production of the film. So she didn't go back during the filming at all. Most of the people that she knew from that period really weren't. Most of the Jews came back,
Right.
and she really became, because she was still a young girl, basically. She was 15 when she returned to Germany, and had to reacclimate. So no, she hadn't gone back, but she did become much more associated with her Judaism when she returned to Germany, which is what was interesting for her experience. But that's a great comment about the dress, because the dress is representative. So, it's representative of another life, and it's bringing that life into this tribal life. It's a connection. It's a thread. All these threads were there. Even the time she spent with Susskind, when she was left alone, when Walter wasn't there, and Susskind shows her the land and the beauty of Africa, and it's like there comes a point where you figure, okay, they're going to carry on an affair, and he almost, it's questionable as to whether they did or not, but he does, because he does say to her, when she asks him, why aren't you married, he says, because I only love married women. It was very interesting, but I don't think, but she does have the affair with the officer at the hotel, which was, out of survival. more than anything else. More than anything else. Thank you, Barbara. Anybody else?
Shelley, there was a question, there was a comment in the chat from Sheila Stark who said, could you please comment on the mother-daughter relationship, Jettel and Regina?
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah, at the beginning, you know, there were periods of contentiousness, but it was she came to rely on her mother. First of all, she was sent away. You know, when she was sent away to school, you know, it really was an arduous time for her. And she really had to adjust to school, and she wasn't happy. You know, and she also was witness to what was going on with her mother. You know, when she went to the hotel, she saw her mother with the officer, and that really put a rift in her feelings. She became very angry, and later on, she, you know, they grew back together, especially towards the end, and began to understand each other as she grew up. But it was a contentious relationship for a time, and then one of dependency. I'm just trying to look in the chat here. My son,
Yeah,
mother,
he has a
daughter.
good comment.
Yeah. Yes.
Shelley, I noticed it's one of the scenes when they were on the savannah, and they, towards the end of the film, where they set the table with the Rosenthal china and the wonderful crystal, and they had really adjusted to the life in Africa, but they brought with them and on top of the life they were living, which I thought was very well done.
Yeah, she insisted in not wanting to change. She resisted any change when they first got there. You know, she was supposed to bring, if you remember, and somebody did mention it, and thank you for that, about the refrigerator. She was supposed to bring a refrigerator, which she did not bring. She brought the china instead, and the silver. You know, and Walter was really upset with that. You know, I give you specific instructions, and this is what you bring. You know, and although it was selfish, it was her mindset. It was her mindset. She really didn't want to, you know, lose who she was.
Well, she was a German woman.
I'm sorry.
I say she was a German woman, and she
Yes.
her background and her life still with her.
Yes, exactly. I see Alice has a great comment. Yes, that scene when she comes back to the tribe with the woman who's dying, the woman she finds by the tree, and doesn't understand. Again, here we go with custom. Doesn't understand why she was turned out, and insists on staying with the woman while she dies. It was so touching. You know, it's in a sense, again, a sense of connecting one culture to another. Was beautifully done. You know, that woman was so, you know, so beautiful. So they had so much dignity in her, you know, dying scene. And I wonder, you know, one wonders when they were telling her, because she wasn't an actress, and saying what her role is in this film, you know, as a culture being told, well, you're going to die in this scene. You know, how does one react? You know, who's not an actor, and is you know, what does she feel like? It was interesting in the way she played the scene, in the way she just was lying there. You know, and Regina, you know, Regina insisting this is not the way it's going to be done. She's not going to be left alone. You don't leave someone alone. Michael.
Yes.
I see your hand up.
Yes. I thought that the husband probably did not explain to her exactly how remote this farm was, because if somebody had said to me, you're going to be in a farm in Africa, I don't think I would have envisioned quite how, it was really, really bare bones. So I don't think she really had an understanding. And I think he probably did that because if she knew that, since she was hesitant to come, I don't think she would have come.
Absolutely, I agree with
you
you
know.
100%. I think it's right. I mean, he's asking her to come to another planet, essentially, and it was barren. It was devoid of anything familiar.
Right.
And yes, I agree. I think it was a huge test for the family, as Bonnie so aptly puts it. It was a huge test because of the unpredictable behavior that they would come up against. But in contrast, as I said at the beginning, the African culture became more welcoming to them.
It did.
Than
And
Germany would have been at that point in time.
But the other thing I wanted to say about the old woman that was dying by the tree, that came right about when they had found out that they had family members that had been murdered. I mean, they didn't just die a natural death. So she's mourning. I think they were all mourning, fathers, sisters, cousins, family. And I mean, I can understand her feeling that way, but the African people took her in. They weren't offended at that, because I think that they saw that she was trying to provide something soothing when she laid by the woman and she sat by the woman that was dying.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
mean, she wasn't doing anything horrible. It was just not being able to be there for her own family and her husband's family, because I think she was crazy about the husband's father too. Remember, he was the one she was talking to in the beginning.
Yeah, that was Max.
Her family too. Yeah, Max. So.
Yeah, and what was interesting, Wendy had mentioned about the authenticity, was the letters that they would receive were coded. You weren't allowed to write, or the letters would be, censored. Coming out of Theresienstadt, coming out of different camps. And, so she really didn't know what was happening. And then finally, it's Walter that really comes to understand what was happening. It's interesting, you bring up about the daughter and the mother. In the end, just before the locust attack, if you remember, Jettel does what Regina did. When she was a teenager, she takes off her top and she walks, down the lane with the thing on her head, as if she were now a native. She were now an African, a member of the tribe, so to speak. Again, the word tribe is so interesting to use when we talk about the film. Because the Jews, we are tribes, and it's here we are in a tribal society. Very interesting. Again, interesting contrasts. Some who is this? Asked Bonnie again. Asked why do I think Jettel decided to return to Germany? She was hesitant, but it had to keep the family together. Walter was going back. She didn't want to stay alone, certainly in Africa. Regina was going back. She was pregnant. She was going to have a baby, and it would be important to have him in Germany. So it would become, their son Max, named after that grandfather. So I think it was an imperative on her part, even though she was reluctant. Helene. Man writes, the film Minari, out now, yes, has a similar thing where the husband takes his Korean wife to a remote area to start his farm. Yes, same thing. It is the same story. This is it's a story of diaspora, if you will, in many ways. It's societies who are spread throughout the earth. And for them, it is a story too. It's a wonderful film, Minari, if you haven't seen it. If you have, I think it's on Hulu. It's on one of those stations. It's available. I'm not sure. Anyway, yes. Anybody else?
Yes,
Is
I have a question.
sure.
The part, one second, let me just get rid of the echo.
Sure.
Okay, the scene where Jettel,
There's an echo.
I know,
Do you have more than one device on?
yeah, we're gonna turn it off. No, turn it. The scene where Jettel meets the man from the Jewish agency.
Yeah.
I thought that was more telling than the way you described it. I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, and his refusal to help them is an overall picture of how many Jews didn't help the underdog Jew at the time. And I thought that was a very interesting scene.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it showed again, he was a British Jew. And it showed the again, you know, the borders that were put up. No, he didn't want to. He was you know, more concerned about his family at that moment. You know, the wife, they were sort of distant. He was distant from these other people. It did show a separation. You're right about that. You know, it throws us off in terms of what's going on here. There's even, you know, there's discord even among the Jews,
But that was very
which
common. That was a very, very common thing at the time.
yes. You know, yes, it was. You know, it's not. It's something that. Thank you for bringing it up. You know, in the film, it's this one isolated scene, and if you don't know, like you do, you wonder why. You know, and there were groups that just were only interested in their own group and wouldn't relate to another group. They wouldn't relate to her group. And well, it even goes so far as the end of that scene, if you remember, the wife makes the little bag of cookies
Right.
gives to her as if she's giving a charity at that point. You know, yes, so it was a little bit bizarre. It was a little bit bizarre. But thank you for reminding us. Anybody else? Anybody else out there? Nobody? Oh, well, let me begin to tell you about the next film, which will be quite a different experience. For the next film, it is entitled The Dinner. The Dinner. It is an Italian film. Now, when you go on Canopy, or it's also available on Hoopla and Tubi if you like commercials. But it's entitled. The Italian title is Il Nostri Ragazzi. It is meaning our children. It means the Italian title means our children, but it will be The Dinner when you look at it on Canopy. And it will say Italy. It's from 2014, and it won the Venice Film Festival. It was a multiple award winner at the Venice Film Festival, and it is also an adaptation of a novel, of a very famous novel, which has been translated into a number of languages. It was a bestseller here in the United States, written by Herman Koch, or Koch, who's Dutch. It was really translated from the Dutch, and it's about the tension between two brothers, their wives and their teenage children, and how it escalates out of control with a video that is revealed during the course of the film. I will not say any more about the plot, but it is an incredibly well done film, very tightly produced, and really wonderfully shot. The performances are terrific, which I will talk about more when we see each other again. But it is an interesting experience that is so relevant to today's society, so resonant in how it's presented, and very revealing, and very revealing. You know, as some of you may know, I always talk about what I call the 3 R's in cinema, which is resonance, resonance, relevance, and revelation. Each film should have that. It should be relevant. It should make you feel either empathy. It should resonate with you in many ways, with your feelings, with your knowledge. It should be relevant in terms of our society versus the society we're looking at. If it's not an American film, even if it is another portion of society. And it should be revealing. It should reveal things to us, not just in terms of the film itself, but revealing of the culture that we're looking at. And I think this film does it very well. And it's something that I'll be able to discuss with you. Look at it carefully. What happens in the frame, the little details that are revealed during the film. So I will look forward to seeing you then, unless anybody has another question.
Shelley, name of the film you mentioned, Collins
The
case.
Dinner.
How is Collins spelled? Collin.
Collini.
The Collins case.
Collini. It's
Command.
not Collins. It's not Collins. It's Collini. It's an Italian name. Collini. Collini. Oh, Susan, thank you. Susan Metch, thank you for mentioning that about Jettel, that after that meeting, because of her disappointment, she gives the cookies to the African children on the street. In her disappointment, she just gives them the cookies, you know, as they walk away, you know, revealing, you know, her disappointment as well as being good to the kids. But interesting comment. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So anybody else? No? I will thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate all your comments. Thank you so much for taking part. And I will look forward to seeing you in, what is it, 2 weeks?
Yeah.
In 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.